the Wisdom African American Education and Cultural Center. We'll be hearing a few words about the center later on. It seems like there's struggle all over the place. They're in the process of struggle. They struggled to get the building, now they're struggling to maintain the activities and programs that they have here. But this afternoon, also, the equipment and everything that we're using here is compliments of POP, People's Organization for Progress. Larry Ham was here earlier. He helped set up and everything. He'll be back a little bit later. He's kind of running around. But I would like to introduce myself. I'm John Brinkley. I have some of my family here, my granddaughter, an honor student, Najee in the back, and my and my daughter, Shani, an educator and entrepreneur. I'm from Plainfield, active down in the Plainfield community, a member of POP, and I'm also a member of the local station board at WBAI. But I would like to start this program without further ado by bringing out my main man, the main driving force at BAI for so many years, Mr. Bernard White. Mr. Bernard White, former program director and now radio entrepreneur. Bernard will give you some of the background about BAI because this program here today is presented by a coalition of organizations who are committed to do what they can to save BAI and move it up to a higher level. I see my co-moderator, Sharon Salam, has just come in, and before Bernard speaks, I'm going to ask Sharon just to introduce herself.
I'm Sharon Salam, and I've been around a long time doing some advocacy work in the community on behalf of children and families, particularly those incarcerated and those in foster care. And I'm also the mother of Yusuf Salam in the Central Park jogger case. And I'm also on the board of WBAI. And I'm hoping that this conversation that we're having here today will enlighten you so that you can go out and enlighten your friends and neighbors to let them know what's going on with the station so that they too can be getting more and more involved in the change that needs to take place. I'm not going to take much of your time up here talking about myself. I'm going to turn everything over to Bernard White.
Well, thank you for coming out today. I think it's a very important issue that we all need to focus on. For those of you who are very much interested in what's happening at WBAI, what we're planning to do today is to see if we can give you some background as well as some understanding that nothing's going to change unless you get involved with it. How many of you are happy with the way BAI is functioning now? Okay. All right. I first came to WBAI back in 1978. Well, no, it was more like 1973. And I was interviewed on WBAI because I was very much active in the case of Clifford Glover, who was shot, the 10-year-old who was shot by Thomas Shea. And I was interviewed at that time as being one of the organizers of the protest that was taking place at that time. Then around 1980, I wound up going down to WBAI to see if I could become a part of what was happening there. I wanted to work in the newsroom. At that particular time, Samori Marksman was the program director. I told him what I wanted to do, and he told me that I could do that, and he sent me to the newsroom. And for about a year, I just about every day out of the year, I went to WBAI to learn how to do radio. I was unemployed at that time, and I used my stipend, or my unemployment check as a stipend to do the work. And I worked in every department. I was in the public affairs, there was an international affairs department at that time, the newsroom, as well as the arts department. Every department, the premiums department, I worked in all of the various departments trying to learn just how this radio thing was working. During that time too, I began to go to some of the national board meetings. And while there at the national board meeting, I began to recognize that there was a lot of antagonism between the people at WBAI and the folks at the national board, primarily those people who were in California. There was a belief that, a mutually held belief, that each side was crazy. The folks in California felt the people in New York were crazy, and the folks in New York felt that the people in California was crazy. There was a certain amount of jealousy that was involved too, because WBAI is located in the middle of the FM dial, and that is a commercial area. All of the radio stations in that portion of the dial are all commercial radio stations. If you notice, the educational stations are all to the left of the dial. That's where you find the BGOs and the NYCs, the other non-commercial entities. They're there. And for some reason, they had this jealousy. And there was a struggle from the very day I got there. There was a struggle at BAI, a struggle that persists even today. There was a belief that since BAI was in the middle of the FM dial, that it could be sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't know if they can still get that kind of money, but it was a belief that it could be sold for hundreds of millions of dollars, that they could take some of that money and help to beef up the other radio stations and also buy some smaller radio stations in various other parts of the country. So that always was a theme. It is a theme that as time has gone on, we hear it more and more, and it's gotten louder and louder as people still think that it's a good idea to sell WBAI and do the same thing, buy those stations in the South. There have always been two major tendencies that existed between existed in Pacifica. I guess one of the tendencies we can call a corporatist tendency. That is people that gravitate toward WBAI, toward Pacifica, who believe that they can transform these community radio stations into large, money-making institutions with a whole lot of listeners. They see themselves, and many of them, from speaking to them over the years, as little Murdochs or as little Bloombergs, where they have the solution to bring in a whole lot of listeners and therefore raise a whole lot of money. They don't say that what they're actually talking about is that if they can take out some of the black people, the Latino people, and focus on the white people with money, then they could make a lot of money. But that's what they do when they wind up getting in charge. They begin to eliminate African Americans, eliminate Latinos, eliminate progressive whites. The other part of this corporatist group is that they don't believe that these stations should be used as places where activists are, to help support movements in communities, to help support struggles that are going on. There are times when I've heard them say that they didn't want to hear about Mumia while they were having their breakfast. They're not interested in community struggles. They're not associated with community struggles. They may go to a meeting or two, but they're not really involved. You never see them at a pop meeting. You never see them at any other kind, at the CMOTAP meeting. They're not involved in that kind of thing. They do just enough to give it the appearance that they have some kind of left credentials, but they're not really involved in anything. The other group are primarily activists. They're involved in what's going on in trying to make the world a better place, trying to make the community a better place, trying to get out information about community struggles. They're organically linked to some of the activities that are taking place directly in community, trying to transform the communities into a better place. This group is constantly bumping heads with the corporatist group, and periodically the corporatist group is the one that takes over. Right now we're in a period where that's the mindset that is controlling Pacifica and is also controlling WBAI. And when the corporatists came into power, they began to systematically eliminate people who they thought were going to be a problem. First of all, they had to get rid of the program director, who they felt was the one who had brought in the programs that they didn't like. Then they fired the station manager because he refused to be forced to fire the program director. Then once they got rid of both the station manager and the program director, they got rid of one of the Jerseyites, Kamal Kalfani. They got him off the air. Then they removed Dr. Kakai. They removed Ron Daniels. They removed Dr. Ali. They removed Luis Reyes Rivera. They began to systematically remove those people as if those folks did not have a constituency. The way that WBAI works is that every program doesn't raise a lot of money, necessarily. But that doesn't mean that they don't have an audience. When folks find people who listen to their program, they don't generally just listen to one program and turn off BAI. They're around to hear some of the other programs. They become part of the large reservoir of people from which we draw from when fundraisers are had. When you begin to eliminate people who are linked to the community, who have a large listenership, not necessarily a large donating listenership, but have a large body of people who tune into them, you begin to eliminate the possibility that during the fund drive, you'll be able to get them to contribute, and so that the institution can make its goals. These folks, too, have lied to the community. They've told the community a lot of lies. After we were terminated, both myself and Anthony Riddle and the rest of those folks were removed, they told everybody that the listenership was going up, that the money was coming in, that the premiums were going out. They were all lies. That was not true at all. The only time that they made some money is in the beginning, when they first came in, because the people were confused. Errol Maitland went on the air and told everybody that they're coming in to change the transmitter, so that they can be controlled by folks in California, so that they could pump in programs here into New York. And people responded by sending in a lot of money. And that particular time, that first fundraiser did pretty well. But after that, it was geometrically decreasing on a regular basis. And they kept telling the lies that it was coming in, because they had to cover up the fact that their idea of what radio was all about, what non-commercial radio was all about, was successful. And it was not successful. And it has gotten progressively worse, to the point where they're now raising funds just about every day. They're having a fund drive, and the money is still not coming in. The missing ingredient in all of this to make this work and to turn it back to community are the people who listen. You've been engineered out of the process, at the same time given the feeling that you're participating because they have elections. These elections are all bogus in terms of having a democracy. They are set up so that people who have money can literally buy the election, and they do. In every area, all of the folks who have money are the ones who wind up winning the majority of these elections. It's set up just like the U.S. presidential election. And it has been engineered to keep you out of the equation. And why we're here today is to tell you that the only way that you can save WBAI, the only way that you can get it back to being the kind of instrument that we need in our communities to inform us and to help us to organize, is if you get involved. So we're going to tell you a little bit more about how to get involved. I've been told that I have to put an amen to this. But I think, even though I was terminated by these folks, a lot of folks say, well, look, you were fired by them. Why are you still messing with them? It's not the individuals. It is the institution. This is a very, very important institution. If we lose it, we will never get it back. And I think it's worth saving. So we're holding meetings in Jersey and in the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan, wherever our listeners are, so that we can try and see if there's enough energy there to try and do what we can to save it. Don't need a lot of people, just need some dedicated people. So hopefully you'll join us in that effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. I'd like to now, just so you know, what the format is going to be today. We're going to have the speakers relate a lot of information to you, and then at the end, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. And then what we would like to do is to break up into smaller groups. We've had one meeting in Harlem last week, and that was a very effective meeting. There were some groups that were formed to work on specific areas. We would like to follow through with that, and if there are some other groups that need to be formed, we'll do that. I know some of you came in a little bit later. This housekeeping. Ladies room is back here through this door, the second door on your left. The men's room is over behind you on my right. The next person. There is a light. There is a light in the ladies' room.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll see if we can't get some light over there. I think Sharon would like to introduce our next panelist.
Okay. Not this one? Okay. Our next speaker is someone that has been around the station for many, many years and has shared and worked with this station and knows it from inside out. And that person is going to be Serene Roberts, and she's going to be talking about the structure of the station and at Pacifica and various issues that's going to enlighten you about a number of things. And let me just say one thing in terms of what John said. I can't impress upon you enough. Write your questions down so that when we open for question and answers, you'll be ready. Okay? Don't just hold them in your head. Jot them down. There's going to be a lot of information that we are going to be covering, and it's going to be in a short time. Serene Roberts.
I'm sorry. I used to be a producer of contributing to a number of programs. I'm currently on the local station board as a listener. I recognize some of you. And I'm also on the Pacifica National Board. Okay. So my name is Serene Roberts. I used to contribute to Wake Up Call. I've contributed to Talkback as a producer, to Haiti, The Struggle Continues, and various programs. But I had the fortune or misfortune, depending on how you want to look at it, of being rather direct and outspoken when I felt things were not going well. So some of the people who are currently in power and I have had disagreements over the years. On the first day that the then interim general manager flew in, I'm not going to say on a broom, flew in to New York, she had a conversation with me. And shortly after that, I went to the station, well, several months after that, I went to the station for a meeting. The meeting had by that time been adjourned, actually, because one of the board majority's members, medical doctor, had actually pulled the chair out from under someone as they were about to sit, causing them injury, and there was a lawsuit and, you know, the whole thing. But I had the misfortune of being in the building when the incident occurred, although I was not in the room. My co-producer, Kamau Kalfani from Patterson, who used to do Under the Learning Tree, saw the medical doctor who owns an insurance company pull the chair from out under this listener and protested. As a result, Kamau and everyone associated with the program, and I was to host that night, I was also a producer on that show, we were banned from the building. This was September 2009, and many of us have not been back since then. So that's who I am, but it's not about me. I just wanted to put the struggle in context for those of you who may not be quite as familiar with my name. There's a are there handouts of this, Bob? There's a handout called How Pacifica Works. There's not a handout. Okay, sorry, there's not a handout called How Pacifica Works, but I'll try to explain it to you. It begins with the members. There are two types of members, listener members and staff members. If you've worked, oh, okay. Okay, great. I know there were some printing problems with it, so it's not very clear, but we'll make it available to you online. You are either a staff member because you've worked for a certain period of time, or you're a listener member because within a certain period of time you gave $25 or volunteered for 3 hours. And BAI used to be full of volunteers, people coming in to answer the phones and to help pack premiums and so on and so forth. It's a very different thing now. Not all of it unintentional, not all of it out of the control, I think, of the people who are in control. Okay, so you remember, every so often there are elections, the elections that Bernard just referred to, and listeners get to choose. Okay, sorry, let me step back a little. There are 24 people on a local station board. In any given election year, half of them are up for election. So half of that would be 12. It would be 9 listeners and 3 staff elected during any given election period. And then the next time, which may be 1 or 2 years later, because it's staggered, then the other half of the board is up for election. The point of having staggered elections is so that you're not replacing your entire board in one shot. That is supposed to help prevent a takeover. It is supposed to retain some institutional knowledge, you know, as you go through the process. Our elections have not worked as well on paper as we had hoped. So you have your local station board of 24 people. These 24 people then elect from among themselves 4 people to go to the national board. 3 of those people will be listeners, 1 person will be staff. The same thing happens at the other 4 Pacifica stations. So from each of the 5 sister stations, right, because you know we're in LA and Washington DC, in Houston and in Berkeley, you know, outside of Oakland. 4 people from each of these 5 boards, as well as 2 people from stations that are considered affiliates, and they're affiliates because they carry some Pacifica programming. Most stations carry Democracy Now!, you know, other community stations, college stations, and so on and so forth. They may carry Democracy Now! Or Free Speech Radio News. Some people carry Michio Kaku's program, and so forth. 2 of those affiliate stations, 2 people, I should say, from affiliate stations are elected onto the Pacifica National Board. So it's a 22-person board. 4 people from each of the 5 Pacifica stations and these 2 affiliates. There's also in Pacifica 2 national executives. The executive director, and right now that's an interim position. It's being held on an interim basis by someone, and the chief financial officer. Those 24 persons comprise the Pacifica National Board, which has, one would say, the ultimate authority within Pacifica to do virtually anything except for selling the stations or selling the signals or doing anything that disposes of the signal on a long-term basis. And that's why your attention is required, because some have made it a mission to make BAI so unpopular around the network. In addition to the fact that our costs locally are so much higher, being in New York, it's a premium cost. You know, virtually 3 of the other 5 stations own their buildings. They're not paying rent. They have their antenna on private property. They're not paying anybody $50,000 a month as we have to pay for the Empire State Building. Until we moved out of Wall Street, we were paying $37,000 a month rent. So that all the other stations combined, the BAI fixed expenses, our rent and so forth, were more than 5 times that of the other stations combined. Things that should be taken into consideration when you look at where the money goes. Okay, it's true that because we're in a dense area and because we have a powerful antenna, we could have a larger listenership than some of those other stations. But that gets back to, who do you really want your members to be? And what is the message? Do we really want to be NPR light? You know, or do we have a mission? Do we still observe the mission? Do we still believe that we're supposed to be creating a platform where issues that aren't commonly discussed gets a hearing, not a soundbite, but a hearing and a full, ample discussion with people representing different positions? Okay, so I sort of got a little off track there. Let me go back to the national board. I'm on the national board. The national board gave BAI a directive to come up with a plan to sustain itself for the next 2 to 3 years. That plan, the charge was given to the local station board and to the staff. Some on the local station board have gone through quite a bit of pains to make sure that the public is not included in any of those discussions. We kind of feel the public owns the station. I mean, you're 85% of the support. 15% of the money that comes into Pacifica comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which I would argue is still our money because that's tax money. It's your tax money, you know. Okay, so the structure, as I said, you, the member, vote for your LSB reps. LSB reps from among themselves elect national board members with the others from around the country supposedly hire and evaluate the work of the executive director and the CFO. Those 2 persons are supposed to be working together but also reporting independently to the Pacifica National Board. We have a new CFO. He came aboard in May, Raul Salvador. He came aboard about six or 7 months after the PNB majority had declined to renew the contract of their own PAL. Okay, so when it comes to the point where your own friends say, we can't keep you, well, okay. At the same time that they declined to renew her contract, they declined to renew the contract of the previous executive director. Last July, both of these decisions were announced. The then executive director, who's a woman named Arlene Engelhardt, we were told in July that she was not going to be renewed, but her contract ran until November. And then very suddenly in August, she was gone. And the then chair of the board, who's Summer Reese, became the interim executive director and remains the interim executive director. No one has explained why within a space of less than 4 weeks, someone who was supposed to have remained for 3 months had disappeared. One assumes she did not sacrifice 3 months' salary just to leave early. So then if you're going to look at where money is gone, since we can't pay our staff, and we're told that we must lay off, BAI staff because they can't be paid, what else could have been done with the money that appears to have been used last summer to move out, the executive director earlier than scheduled? So there are a lot of questions, and we're going to do a piece about the money. They always say, follow the money. Trite but true. Okay, I'll stop there, and if you have any questions about structure or something, we can take it up later.
I want to thank Shereen for her brief update regarding this information and where we are. Don't forget, there will be a time for your question and answers. I'm sure you'll have questions for everyone regarding what's happening, because it's only through you all here in this audience and other people like you that we can get a handle on this situation, because it is you who are in control, not us, not Bernard White, not Serene Roberts. It is you. You are the chief executive officers of this corporation, Pacifica WBAI, and we are just here to bring you up to date.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. I don't know if Sharon told you, but she is the mother of the Central Park Five. That's how I consider it. The mother of Yusuf Salam. And, she's all about struggle. She struggled and had a faith in the beginning, and she's still struggling with her son in order to get their due from being wrongfully incarcerated. We now need to get into the nitty-gritty. The finance. Serene said follow the money. Our next speaker, Bob Lederer, he is a member of the LSB. He is also a member of, he's a staff member. He has a program on BAI. He also had been a member on the national board. So I would like to bring up Bob Lederer to talk about the finances and more about the structure of what's going on concerning the unpaid staff and the paid staff, because before too long, I think you may have heard Felipe Luciano said that last Friday was going to be his last day, but now he's extended to the end of the month, and others of our favorite commentators and producers, Hugh Hamilton and Esther and others, you won't be hearing their voices. And so Bob is going to relate what's going on with them, what's going on with the money. Bob? Bob will explain.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see everyone. I want to kind of lay out the state of the finances of WBAI, and I want to thank my colleague on the board, William Herwagen, who serves with me on the finance committee of the board, and both of us have been on it for many years. And he's got an accounting background. He's got a real sharp eye for what's going on and what's not being told to the board, which is supposed to exercise oversight. And so, the cutting to the chase, the finances of not only WBAI, but the Pacifica National Network are in a shambles. And that's on two levels. As everyone knows from the constant on-air fund drives, the station in particular, WBAI, is in extreme deficit and is really having severe trouble paying its bills on the one hand. But on the second level, the record keeping about the finances is also in a shambles because management has just not provided the wherewithal and have not brought in people with the skills to be able to, again, allow the board to exercise the normal oversight and indeed allow the auditors, the independent auditors who are required to do an oversight each year, to do their work in a prompt fashion. So I'm just going to go through some of the points, and then certainly you can ask questions and we can get into more details. In terms of the record keeping, William has written, and there's a paper on the back table that hopefully you all picked up where he summarizes this. He, like I, have gone to many of the meetings of the National Board as observers and watched the chief financial officer who was installed when this new crew took power on the board in 2009, and she served, as Serene was saying a minute ago, until her contract was not renewed last year. And we would watch questions being asked by the board saying, well, can you explain exactly what is the financial situation of this station and what's happening with this expense and this fundraiser? And she would often say, well, I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't have that information with me. And this went on meeting after meeting after meeting. And for us on the finance committee, it was especially frustrating because we're the official body empowered to seek information from management and so that we can advise on the annual budget. That's the whole role that the board is supposed to play, is actually approving a budget and then passing it on to the national board for final approval. But that process was totally blocked, or virtually blocked, by the inadequacy of information. For instance, one of the core tools of any financial analysis is the balance statement, and that shows assets, liabilities, and capital that's available. And we on the Finance Committee have asked for this over and over and over again, and have been told that we don't have the software right now, we're working on it, all kinds of reasons, but the bottom line is to this day we haven't gotten it. All right, well, I could give more examples of the problem with providing information, but I think you get the general idea. But what all this becomes even more dire at a time when the finances are in such severe crisis. As you all know, the on-air pledge drive days have gone up and up and up. 5 years ago, it was about 100 days a year. This year, it's at least 140 and heading upward. As was said earlier, there's now a pitch every day on the air, at least for some amount of time. This is approaching, it's more than a third of the days of the year and approaching half the days. And the income from that pitching is going down. 5 years ago, it was about $20,000 per day when they had a pledge drive. This year, it seems it's somewhere in the range of $10,000 a day, occasionally a little bit more, but it's generally going down. The listeners are getting saturated and from many reports are just tired of these constant appeals, particularly when some of the premiums are so questionable in terms of the quality of science and the health premiums and some of the politics that masquerade, that are progressive in kind of superficial form, but actually underneath you find right-wing voices being offered in some of these videos and DVDs. The bottom line at this point, according to the most recent data provided by the general manager, and keep in mind this is not audited data, so we don't even know if this is accurate, but we're sure it's at least this bad, is that WBAI is running a minimum of $300,000 behind its projected income for this year. That's very severe, and that's even after the fact that you all heard about the impact of Hurricane Sandy on the station, the building in which we then had our offices. The bottom 2 floors were flooded, and that affected wiring and phones and a lot of other issues. And so the other stations of Pacifica did a one-day on-air pledge drive, and they did bring in $200,000. So despite that extra income, despite the fact that thanks to a member of Justice and Unity who was on the national board for 5 years, Nia Bediako, she's no longer on the board, she was able to secure the place that the station now operates its studio at City College in Harlem, which led to a savings. Instead of $37,000 a month at Wall Street, the current rent at that studio in City College is $5,000. So that's a $32,000 monthly savings. Yet despite all that, there's still this severe deficit. Meanwhile, the station owes Pacifica, because Pacifica levies a tax, if you will, on all the stations to support its kind of overarching structure. WBAI is $1.5 million behind on those bills, and it has its own direct creditors of upwards of $200,000, and that's just as of March, the latest figure that was released. Meanwhile, Pacifica owes money to huge amounts of money to outside creditors, including the nonprofit that produces Democracy Now!, which reportedly Pacifica owes $2 million to. So you have this really severe crisis, which led to twice this spring, WBAI did not pay its employees on time. In one case, I believe it was about a 2-week delay, which is a straight up violation of labor law. Eventually, they did make the payment, but this is really unacceptable. Now, many of you heard about the crisis with the transmitter with the transmitter at the Empire State Building that was revealed in February. Now, what happened there was that the station had gotten so far behind in its $50,000 a month payments that the Empire State sued Pacifica for non-payment and threatened them with eviction if they didn't pay up quickly. And the national board and the local board majority withheld that information from the rest of the board, from the staff, and from the listeners. And it wasn't until the same Nia Bediako, who I mentioned earlier, the Justice and Unity member who sat on the national board, became aware of this, and then she blew the whistle publicly. And at the next board meeting, we all insisted and got passed a motion that this be immediately told to the listeners, and that there be a special fund set up separately just to keep funds for the transmitter, so that we don't get evicted. Because once we lose that transmitter, you know, we're as good as off the air. There are other locations, they are far less powerful. It would be a catastrophe to lose that transmitter. And so, of course, the listeners rallied, as we knew that they would, because they love the station. We all love the station, and donated generously, and that eviction was averted. Although there's still some back payments that are going to be due up through September, and you know, so we're not out of the woods completely. The bottom line is that WBAI has next to no money, even though there are other stations who are doing better and that could extend loans. There are pockets of funds that could be shifted around. And what I'm going to get into now is some of the proposed solutions to this crisis that are the alternative to the draconian anti-worker solution that both national management and the national board have chosen, which is mass layoffs. Some of the paid staff are reporting that, well, first of all of them received notices that they could be laid off about 3 weeks ago, and the paid staff and the union is reporting that the actual layoffs may amount to about 3/4 of them. So that could mean going down from about 28 equivalent full-time people to 7 or 8. That would be, of course, a disaster, and as was said by John, that would mean some of the voices that you're familiar with and really value, like Hugh Hamilton, like Esther Armand, like a whole set of Felipe Luciano, a whole set of people in the morning and the afternoon, and the entire news department would all be cut, would all be gone from the air. This is no way to run a radio station. And so let me talk to you in my closing segment about some of the efforts that the Justice and Unity campaign, which initiated this coalition that's meeting today. It's a coalition of 10 community organizations. Justice and Unity has had a minority on the board for the last 5 years or so. We have 11 out of the 24 board members. And in that position, we have really tried very hard to solve problems, to be practical, to help the station survive financially. And we've been blocked or deflected in many of those efforts. But also, the paid and unpaid staff, whether or not they support our group, Justice and Unity, or whether they just care about the station, they've also made efforts to propose solutions to management. And again, management seems to surround itself with a small group of people that they entrust to make decisions, and they don't really open up very much to outside people, including the very people that do the week-to-week, day-to-day programming. Here's a few examples of ideas that have been deflected. The unpaid staff, which used to have a union until it was crushed by the management that was kind of forced on us as a result of firing Bernard and transferring Tony Riddle back in 2009. The unpaid staff union, before it was crushed, came up with some very creative strategies for off-air fundraising. Everyone in the nonprofit world knows that you have to do a variety of methods to raise money. You can't rely on any one thing. And BAI has suffered from a lack of imagination for quite a while of just, well, let's just have more days of on-air pledges. There were ideas about benefit concerts. We know some very renowned musicians who would be undoubtedly willing to do concerts. There's a lot you can do with those people who have been generous donors. You can go back to them, cultivate them, have cocktail parties for them, have special benefits, events. There's whole work with bequests. There are many, many types of things that can be done off the air that have not been tried or have been half-heartedly tried. And the unpaid staff, as well as at times the paid staff, especially recently since the layoffs were announced, the paid staff has offered different suggestions, and very few of them have been taken. Also, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Right. Well, in a similar vein, there have been some of these same ideas about doing benefit concerts and off-air, cultivating some of the major donors and so forth. So let me go back to the question of moving out of Wall Street, because that lease was signed, a 15-year lease was signed in 1998. It expired last December 31st. And before Bernard was fired in 2009, he started initiating efforts and brought in the staff to work with him on finding a much cheaper location so that we could get out of that lease and get out of that albatross around our neck. And he actually helped to raise $150,000, which has since disappeared, for a capital campaign. Now, as the lease came towards its expiration last December, Bernard by this time had been elected with the highest number of votes ever received by any listener member. Now that he was no longer a manager, he ran as a listener, got elected to the board, and brought a motion as a board member last August and said, look, let's not renew this lease. Management was saying we're going to have a 3-year renewal. And Bernard said, no, that makes no sense. Let's get out of the lease, by the end of the year or a little bit afterwards, and let's move to a cheaper place that's temporary as a way station to eventually having our own place. And granted, it will mean some hardship, some shrinking of operations, but we're in a dire crisis. That was put to a vote. It was defeated by the board majority, and in fact, they even ridiculed it and said, this is totally unrealistic. This will never happen. It would just cost an exorbitant amount to move, blah, blah, blah. Well, only to find out 5 months later, in the wake of Hurricane Sandy, that's exactly what management realized that they had to do because of the damage done to the building in which the studios were. And suddenly, what had become what had been deemed as impossible and unfeasible and way too expensive was exactly what they did. Although again, it was only the intervention of Justice and Unity through Nia Bediako that found a place cheap enough at City College to make it affordable. So that's one example. And then the final example is once the transmitter crisis was revealed under intense pressure from us in March, then we set in motion a whole series of fundraising efforts, we being Justice and Unity and working together with paid and unpaid staff. We passed a motion to set up a call-out center to ask lapsed donors to renew their pledges. That was done for several weeks, raised several $1,000s. Staff, paid and unpaid, and listeners worked together on 2 musical fundraisers in May, one mainly Latin music, another was Peter Yarrow, Peter, Paul and Mary, and others. Again, several thousand was raised. Many staff have put forward a proposal for a radiothon modeled on the old Jerry Lewis telethon with celebrities and people who've been on the air for many times. Management has put that off consistently. That was offered to them back in May. And recently several of us worked on a proposal for an email appeal to recent medium and high range donors. But that required certain improvements of the website to make it easy to donate directly whatever amount you want to give, and that hasn't happened yet, even though management has said that they're open to this. And finally, the idea of approaching foundations and wealthy individuals for donations in an organized way with someone who's a professional in that area has been broached, and that funds could be raised for such a professional to be hired. Again, that has just gone nowhere. And now the SAG-AFTRA union, that's the name of the union representing the paid staff, has submitted a petition for transparency in the fundraising, a reevaluation of Pacifica's bylaws, and other methods to deal with the finances. And at this point, where it stands is that because of apparently some errors in the notice of layoffs, the deadline was extended. It was originally going to be July 15th. It's been extended, just announced yesterday, to July 31st. And in the meantime, Pacifica is negotiating with the union, supposed to be exploring alternatives to layoffs, but we'll see whether that goes anywhere. It seems very unlikely. But in the meantime, we have been mounting this e-petition that there's a hard copy in the back, and I urge you all to go online to change.org and find it and sign it and send it to all your friends, because that's already putting pressure on the national board, and hopefully with that kind of effort and many other efforts that we'll talk about at the end of the meeting, we can really bring a force of listeners who are concerned and troubled and are demanding that this station not be frittered away through financial mismanagement, but that we keep this precious jewel in the hands of the communities that so badly need it. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank Bob for his insight. Thank Bob for his insight in terms of bringing us up to date on what's happening with the financial situation. As you know, in these few minutes, we can't cover everything, but we're trying to give you an overview in terms of what is going on. Right now, we'd like to bring back Bernard White for a few moments. And as we get closer and closer to our question and answer period, I hope you all have been writing your questions down, because everyone's going to be on stage sitting in these chairs waiting to answer shortly. Bernard.
Okay, what I've been instructed to do is to ask you all to take out of your wallets and pass them forward, so that no, we do need not any large donations, but we certainly could use some cash to help to move this effort forward. So we'd like for you to make a donation to this effort if you can. If you can't do it now, then at least do it later. So I guess someone will be coming around to pick up on this. The deacons are passing around the plate to help pay for the space. as we said earlier, you know, we have the group that who's in opposition to us. This would not be a problem for them at all. They would be able to pay for the space and probably even pay some people to come down here and sit in the pews. But we're the poor part of the equation. But we do appreciate whatever you can give to help toward this effort. This is a beautiful space. I hear that there's a lot of controversy, a lot of turmoil about it, and I can see why anybody would want to have a space like this. This is a very nice community space. Huh? It's not a bad idea. Huh? Good. How long has Adelaide Sanford, it's been named after her, the charter school? Huh? About 10 years for that? I was here to... Uh-huh. Right. Well, just like anything else, if you're not going to fight, you're not going to have it. Because one of the things we have to learn is that freedom is a constant struggle. You know, after the coup in 2000, everybody thought that, okay, everything was cool. But the people who were fighting to get control, they continued to fight. While many of us felt that, okay, we had won the battle, but we had not we might have won the battle in terms of stopping them, but we did not win the war. They continued to fight. And as I said before, the missing ingredient has been the listeners. And now it is at the point where if the listeners don't do anything, then it's going to be gone. And that would really be a shame, because there have been some really magic moments at WBAI. I'm sure that all of you have at some point heard something that made you really glad that it was there, that you could hear about what was going on either in South Africa, in Harlem, in Newark, or something that just kind of made you feel a whole lot better about yourself, or gave you a much deeper understanding about some issue that was going on in the world. That's what listener-sponsored radio can do. Corporate radio, for the most part, is not going to do that. They're not really interested in what's happening in community. Their primary interest is selling dog food, selling cereal, selling soda, potato chips. That's their primary interest. The primary interest of non-commercial radio is to get information to people. Okay, John.
Through your generous contribution, we collect $113. Wow. $113. Thank you very much. And this will go directly to Wisdom. And again, either someone will be speaking about the status of Wisdom and what's going on with Pop shortly, waiting for Larry to come. If he doesn't come, good brother Amanifu will say a few words. But right now, I want to say some words. Bob, I want to bring Bob back up to say something about the Lynn Stewart. Thank you.
I'm sure everyone knows that Lynn Stewart is a longtime human rights attorney who has represented many political prisoners and many people from oppressed communities who've been mistreated and treated unjustly by the system, and is now serving a 10-year sentence. It's totally unjust based on the false charge of, quote, aiding terrorism. She's in her 4th year of that sentence. She's a 73-year-old grandmother, and before she went to prison in 2009, she had already been diagnosed and treated for breast cancer, and it was in remission, but unfortunately it recurred last fall. And the system... Okay. The prison system delayed in getting her the proper tests, and finally, after pressure from the outside, she did get treatment. She got chemotherapy, but unfortunately the cancer has spread to her shoulders, her back, and her lymph nodes. Her white blood count has recently been going down seriously. Her life is in mortal danger. She applied, I believe it was in April, for compassionate release, which is allowed under Bureau of Prison regulations. She's, by the way, in a Texas women's prison, federal prison. The local warden of the prison approved the application. The National Bureau of Prisons rejected it 2 weeks ago, which had to come directly from Attorney General Holder. So there's been a large-scale pressure campaign, and we urge all of you to participate in that. There's an online petition. There's a half-page flyer in the back with all the details. Go to her website, her support website, lynnstewart.org, for that information, as well as a phone campaign to Attorney General Holder, President Obama, and also the Director of the Bureau of Prisons. We have to get her out. We have to get her home to heal. She is our freedom fighter. She's also a former member of the WBAI local station board, ran with Justice and Unity in 2009, but she's someone who's devoted her life to serving others, and now we need to be there for her.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to bring up good brother Amanifu. Excuse me? Okay. All right, what we'll do is, I know you all have a bunch of questions. I'd like to bring Bob and Serene up, and we can start to field your questions. Okay? Yeah. Okay, just raise your hand. And hello?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sandra Holmes from Newark, New Jersey, and I've been a listener I go back to Samori Martin, so I'm quite familiar with the station, and I do love it. And when you say there's always a program that you like and that you kind of cherish, this happens to me every day. I start at 6 a.m. in the morning with BAI, so I'm here to do everything that I can and try to encourage others so we can save the station. Now, my question is, you tell me here that the local station board and someone else said they were part of it, the main, what's the name for it? Pacifica National. But yet it seems that we don't have no power. We don't know how much money is actually in the arrears. How do we go about getting this information? That's my first question.
Well, first you have to just demand it.
Outside of demanding it, the listeners have never demanded that information. So that this will be something new.
Okay, so how do we go about getting the process to demand the information? We need to know the information, so how further can we go without knowing how much money we owe?
Well, that's
So, they have monthly local station board meetings. Well, they have monthly local station board meetings when they want, because there was a meeting scheduled for this past Wednesday, and they notified us a couple of days before that, that they were going to cancel it without stating a reason. But there are these monthly meetings, or these meetings that should happen monthly, that used to happen monthly, at which members of the public can come out and speak during public comment. For those of you, the telephone situation at the station is a bit dicey because they've moved to these temporary offices at World Financial Center, and they all have Google phones or something, and either they don't work or no one answers them or something, but I've heard lots of complaints about being able to get through. But for those of you who do have email, you can write to the general manager, gm@wbai.org, right? And please copy us at info@justiceunity.org with your GM, as in general manager, at WBAI.org. You can also copy us at info@justiceunity.org. And we'd be happy to raise those questions at the next opportunity. Some of the questions have been, especially on the financial end, Sharon Salam and William Hirwabin, whose statement Bob shared with us earlier, have been, consistently demanding answers. And sometimes we get useful information. But it's important to put it on the record that we know that there's something amiss and that we expect information. We cannot literally walk into the office and dig through the books, but there is actually a process where a director, which is to say a national board member, can request any piece of information from the foundation except for certain, health things about personal records and so forth. And it may come to needing to do regular director's inspections to get what should have been given to the board in public to begin with. But yeah, email is at this point the best bet.
Okay, pass that over to Bob. Wait. We have to do it orderly. We have to do it orderly. Bob has a few words he just wants to share in regards to that question.
Anyway, it's been a very informative meeting. I think Bob answered part of the question that I was most interested in. This is a publicly supported radio station that gets its money primarily from the people and its listeners and its membership. But what I really wanted to ask, have you explored more creative ways of getting the membership actually involved in fundraising? Yeah, I have a sizable listenership, but almost never do I see that mass public out there really involved, somehow, if we're exploring ways to do that, let us know. But I think that's something that's vital and necessary. It's obvious that it's not coming from where it's supposed to come from now.
Okay, that's a question on how to mobilize the listenership in order to support the various efforts. And indeed, we do have when we break up one of the committees is outreach and education. And so maybe you can get involved in that committee. Bridget? Okay, we go 1, 2, 3. But she has raised her hand. Huh? Please.
Good afternoon, I'm Joanne Sims from Pop. My question is, how come nobody's going to jail? Because somebody's definitely playing with the money, not telling the staff and all of you guys something. But there's some shady stuff going on. And will the staff maybe do an investigation, hire a lawyer, try and get a lawyer or prosecutor and send somebody to jail?
Well, part of this effort is we have a legal committee that's going to be looking into a variety of different things. So I guess based on their finding and whatever pressure they can apply, they will determine whether there's any cause for anyone to go to jail. But there is a legal committee that was formed at our last meeting that we held in Manhattan, and we would just hope that some of you here would be willing to work with that committee. They're developing a strategy on how they can make a legal approach to this issue.
All right, hello. I have 2 questions or comments. On the radio, they've been announcing a meeting for next Wednesday for community involvement. I'm wondering if that's anything that is affiliated with the Justice League here, or if that's put out by the station board. And the other thing is, how successful have these forums been? Are people more energized? Have you seen more people support the Justice League and put more pressure on management? And what are the top 3 things that we should leave here with? What should we be doing? 1, 2, 3, so that we know the next person, this is what we need to tell them. We've got a lot of literature, there's a lot to read. What can we get the cliff notes?
So, the meeting that has been announced is a meeting by a group called the Community Advisory Board. This is a board that has a task of assessing the community needs. At the one community advisory board that I was able to attend, because a number of them were held at the station before the hurricane, and I'm not allowed at the station, so I couldn't attend those meetings. But at the one meeting that I was able to attend at a different location, I did not sense that there was either the kind of participation from that full board, which has, I believe, about 10 or 12 people. But the day that I attended, there were 3 people who did not seem particularly connected to what was happening. And I know that one person who seems to have made himself the spokesman of the board, I don't know whether he's been elected chair, is a former programmer who I think is very interested in affecting the programming, which is not exactly the task of the Community Advisory Board. So it certainly is a place to which one can pay some attention and make one's concerns heard, but where it goes after that, I don't know, because I've not seen a formal report from the Community Advisory Board to the LSB, which it's required to do in the I think they've been around for 3 or 4 years. They were elected by the former, I believe the interim general manager, LaVarn Williams, even before this new general manager. So that's one on that tip. On the tip of what we want you to walk away with in terms of what we need done, I'm not asking you to become a member or make sure your membership is active, because I certainly understand that there are some serious questions about what's happening, and I'm not asking you to trust and simply put your money out there, because I'm assuming that your money is probably as hard for you to get as my money is for me to get, and you want to be sure that it's going to be used properly. I know certainly people pledge because they enjoy the programming and because they support the station, and we're looking at a possibility that 3/4 of the staff is going to be laid off, and there's no assurance that even if we were each to write a $1,000 check today before we left here, that any of that would change. So I'm certainly not going to tell you hurry up and send money, because I think the question has to be asked, to what end to what use will this money be put, right? But you should be ready to donate if and when the proper answers are prepared. In the meantime, there's a petition online that says stop the layoffs, stop program changes until you get a properly vetted program director in there, because right now shows are being added to the schedule. If you go to BI.org, you'll see it. Staff don't even get a heads up that this stuff is happening. And our third request, what was the third request on that petition? Oh, this is not good. It's in your package, if that helps at all. I'm sorry? Right, and to do some serious off-air fundraising, because you listen to the station because you love the programming, not because you want to hear 516-620-3602 all day, every day, right? So we want time for the real programming that makes the station, and the bulk of the money cannot continue to come from on-air fund drives. There are ways, there are not-for-profits that have been in existence for decades, where you don't have to keep hammering away at the same bunch of listeners for money. Whether you look at your database, you see there's some people who have more money than others. There are ways to do outreach. Reach out to community newspapers. Not everything has to go to a magazine. Not every ad has to be placed in a magazine where the demographics are, the average person is 60, the average person is white, the average reader is male, the average reader makes $80,000. We're not afraid of money. We don't think that money makes people dirty. But we do think that if you're going to do outreach and say, we're here and this is what we're doing, then that message ought to be as broadly directed to the people in our area as possible.
Okay,
Bob?
With our plan,
Okay.
that question about the energy from the community. All right, and then we have one, two quick more questions, and then we'll have to, we need to break up into the groups.
These forums have been, these forums have been very successful, I think. I think that it's the first time that
we have really gone out to the people. People are very concerned. I was at the International African Arts Festival in Brooklyn for 4 days last week. And without question, everybody, and we talked to hundreds of people, everybody that came up said that they were very much concerned with what was happening at WBAI, and that they were willing to do, to try and help to turn it around. So the forums are finally giving people some way of getting in touch with what's going on. There's a lot of confusion. They're hearing one thing, and they're hearing conflicting views about what's going on. At one point they tell them everything is good, money's coming in, we got listeners. Next thing they tell them we don't have any money. Money that was collected, they don't know where it's gone. So at some point somebody's got to say, oh, wait a minute. And this is the whole wait a minute meetings.
Okay, I've been a listener to BAI since at least the mid-60s, and I have contributed a lot of money. I remember years ago we used to have house parties, and that made it so much more personal. So I thought that would be a good way to get more people involved, because there are a lot of progressive listeners in New Jersey. I mean, when I listen to the fundraisers, you hear, oh, wonderful, this was from such and such, and so many addresses and donors from New Jersey. But anyway, I'm only talking about Essex County, because that's where I live. And I remember years ago, we did have house parties, and we even went on street corners, in some of the suburban areas, and I think even once in Newark too, to let people be aware. They would, give permission to put up a table and so on and so forth, and have donations. And, I don't know why that kind of grassroots approach couldn't be applied again for work, of course, but I think that's another approach. Anyway, thank you.
Good afternoon, esteemed panel, and it's a privilege and a joy to be in your presence and with your information, and thank you, because I too listen from dusk to dusk each day at WBAI, and I have questions because sometimes I don't know if we're both speaking the same language about the information that's coming to us so we can respond to. It's like, well, wait a minute, from March to April, May, almost June, we did a fundraiser and we had nothing? It doesn't make sense. So as a member of POP, Larry Ham, the chairman, what I'm saying, because we benefited, and it's been so much enhanced that the WBAI has been their time at great events, whether it was the law library, whether it was marches in the streets, one of the most successful marches in Newark, Democracy Now! Covered, and Fred Nugent covered, or these kind of events. It's just been powerful. So simply put, what I'd like to know, as we say in show business, what is your wish list? And even more refine it, wish list in the areas of management, financial, and community output. Thank you.
Can I say a little something about that last question? Some of the documents in your packet address that. Certainly the online petition has 3 immediate issues, which Serene has already outlined about stop the layoffs and do a serious off-air fundraising campaign and don't make programming changes without a vetted program director. Longer term, there's on the table is the platform of Justice and Unity and a set of proposals we've been putting forward for several years on how to make it financially sustainable. And I should mention that in terms of the ideas, like the house party idea, which is great, and others that you've put forward or might think of, that there is supposed to be a process right now where the local board and the staff are supposed to put together a plan for making the station sustainable over the next 2 to 3 years and report back to the national board, except for the fact that the powers that be on the local board are doing it top down and excluding the listeners. They have rejected our proposal to have open public meetings where folks like you can come, speak directly to the board, and give these excellent suggestions firsthand. And now they're having private, secret meetings to do this. So we're going to keep on the pressure to make that an open process, and we encourage you to join us in that. And hopefully, in the remaining minutes, we're going to sit down in committees and try to work out some strategies to heighten the pressure and get the word out to a lot broader circles of people.
All right, thank you. I know there's still probably some other questions, but we are time bound. We do have to get out here on a timely basis. So what we would like to do now is to begin to set up into these committees. But let me give you a little bit of background. Everyone wanted to know what you can do to help. There is a handout that says to help Save WBAI. As Serene said, sign the petition. And this is to Pacifica Radio Management and Board to stop the mass layoffs at WBAI. You can too attend and speak out at WBAI local station board meetings. The last one was canceled. We will get the word out on the public list, and if you signed up here or have signed up previously, we will get the word out through POP, through the Justice and Unity email list. Call in and speak out during on-air reports to the listener. That's always important to, like this morning on the count, Hugh Hamilton, there's a number of venues you can do that. Become a member of WBAI. Now, there were some cautionary notes, but bottom line, at some point, you need to become a member in order to vote. And it's detailed how you can do that in this handout. You should take this handout, keep it, share it with your friends. You can join one of our action committees, and we will be breaking up into those action committees and shortly. You can send your ideas for Saving WBAI to the station. You can write savewbai@gmail.com. And that comes to us, Justice and Unity. We'll compile them all and submit them to the proper channels through the station. And you can also join our low traffic email list. We don't send out a whole lot of stuff all the time, but when we do, it's important information. And spread the word about the up and coming meetings. If you have any friends in Queens, that's Eddie Murphy's favorite place, right? Queens. SaveWBAI@gmail.com. All this is in the flyer handout that says what you can do to help save WBAI. But I do want to, just reinforce it by saying next Tuesday, July the 16th, 7 p.m., there'll be meetings of the direct action and legal research committees at 60 Wall Street. That's an atrium. A lot of good meetings take place there. That's in Manhattan. And on Saturday, July the 20th, from 2 to 5, the coalition, this is a coalition meeting here, the Save WBAI, is meeting in Queens at Simultac, and that's 135-5 Rockaway Boulevard between 134th and 136th Streets. So that's the general information about what you can do and what meetings are coming up. Now, right now, I know we have a few folks, but there are three committees that we have. The first one is our legal research committee. Someone asked the question, shouldn't we be taking them? Shouldn't someone be going to jail, or shouldn't someone be sued, or all those are legal questions. And I think that yes.
I just wanted to say something too. That this is we just started this, and it's in the very early stages. And what we need is more people to know that it has started. So if you could just tell your friends, those folks who who listen to WBAI, who are probably dissatisfied with what's going on, that this is happening. It will help this effort to grow and get the kind of critical mass that we need in order to bring about some change. So I would just suggest that you tell as many people as possible that these things are taking place, so that we can make it different. We don't want to just have this be one of those meetings where we come out to hear some information and nothing results from it. This is a very, very precious institution, and we've got to take it seriously and bring it to people who we know are going to get involved in bringing about this change. A change that, we may not even be involved in, but this is an institution that needs to be there for all of the struggles that are taking place in our community, all of the information that goes unreported that's happening around us. This is the only place that folks can get this information. So please inform as many people as you think would want to get involved with this effort.
Okay. So the three current committees that we have are legal research, direct action, and education and outreach. And the good brother Larry Ham is in the house. Yeah. Right. I'll tell you what, before we break into these committees, I would like to bring Larry up. Hopefully he's caught his breath, because I know he's been running. This is the busiest man in New Jersey. I know about New Jersey, I don't know too much about New York, but he is definitely the busiest man in New Jersey. And he doesn't get paid to do all this running around and speaking. But Pop has been on the case for many years, and Wisdom has been here since '97 in this location, and it's all about struggle. And I'd like to bring Larry up to say a few words about Pop's and Wisdom's struggle.
How's everybody doing? Amanifa, you didn't speak already? Amanifa was supposed to speak for me. All right. First of all, let me say that I want to thank, and I'm sure John has already done this, but once again, thank the Women in Support of the Million Man March for letting us meet in their facility. Sister Frederica was here earlier. I was actually here earlier. I brought the equipment down for John, but then I had to go back and do some other things. And I ran into Sister Bay, and she had to leave too. But she asked me to bring greetings on behalf of Wisdom. And, you know, it's very interesting that 2 key institutions in our community have been under attack. 2. And it's really probably more than 2. I'm just talking about 2 right now. You know, WBAI and the Adelaide Sanford School. I guess if one was to look across the country, like Bernard has the opportunity to do when he talks to his guests from all around the world, you know, this is probably something that's going on all across the country where progressive institutions are under attack. But regardless of the outcome of these struggles, we have to keep fighting. And we should fight to the last minute to preserve WBAI. And while we fight to preserve WBAI, we should also fight to establish new institutions and other progressive media. I know Bernard works with CPR Metro, and there are other people that have started their own internet radio stations and internet programs. So we need as many media outlets as possible, so that if one comes under attack, you know, we have something else to fall back on. But certainly WBAI has been the flagship for many years. Now, there are people in this room who probably been listening to WBAI longer than I have, but I guess I could call myself a long-time listener. I think I've been listening to WBAI at least since the early 1980s. In fact, I remember the first WBAI radio program was on, there was a program called Illuminations at one time with Bill Lynch over on, what was that? Over on 8th Avenue. I remember taking the back elevator up to go on that station. Now, I'm dating myself now because Bill Lynch had asked me to come on that show and talk about the People's Energy Cooperative, which was a 400-member fuel oil co-op that I had organized here in the Essex County area, and that had to be in 1981, 1982. So that's how far back I go with WBAI. So I've been listening for that long, and certainly we know that the station is more than a half-century old. But I think the thing we have to do right now is concentrate on how we can come up with the money, because that seems to be the bottom line, that we need to do more fundraising to try to keep the station afloat and to try to keep the station open, because it has been a beacon for grassroots organizing. You know, when we couldn't get coverage from any other media outlet for any of the kind of things that Pop was doing, we could always rely on WBAI. You know, and I hope that the station will what is the word when a boat has to reset itself? There's a word for it. Yeah, well, kind of that's what I mean, but stabilize, that's close enough. What's the word? Right itself, that's right. That's a naval term, right? You have to get the boat to right itself again. And I hope when the boat rights itself again, it'll go back to some of the practices that it used to have. Personally, I think that WBAI's niche is to be the voice for radical politics in this area. I can remember when Bokeem came to me, oh my goodness, this had to be almost a dozen or so years ago. People were reaching out to find out how, you know, once we got the station back after the attempt to sell the station, what kinds of things. And I said then, we had a meeting, we were in the lobby of Penn Station in Newark, and I told Bokeem, I said, WBAI's niche is to be the voice of the movement, the voice for radical politics, you know, and that's my firm belief, you know, and if we don't really grasp that mission, then I think we do ourselves a disservice. You know, there are many shows on the station right now that grasp that as their mission in general and for the particular struggles of housing, education, labor, and so on and so forth. But we need a channel for radical politics, a channel, and not just radical politics in general, but a channel for the movement, if you know what I'm talking about. For the movement that's directly tied. WBAI should be the kind of station when we turn it on, we find out what's happening in the streets of New York, in the streets of New Jersey. What are people doing to fight back? And a lot of the programs already grasp that and have that, but we need that even more. And if we go off into a lot of abstract stuff, I think we're really gonna miss the mission. But let's do what we can to save WBAI. Let's do what well, I can't say that with regard to the Adelaide Sanford School, because essentially the state has moved in to shut down the Adelaide Sanford School. And that's going to be a great loss to our community, because this was an educational institution that was trying to bring, you know, a progressive and Afrocentric perspective to education. I guess that was a little too much for the powers that be, and they shut it down. You know, it's funny, they shut down the charter schools that had the black names. You know, in Newark, they shut down Adelaide Sanford, and in Jersey City, they shut down Schaumburg. You know, there's a charter school named Schaumburg in Jersey City. So they shut down Schaumburg, they shut down Adelaide Sanford, two schools that were trying to bring, you know, progressive black perspective to education. But let's keep fighting, brothers and sisters. That's all I can say. I didn't even come to give remarks. I came mainly to listen. I'm just glad to see all of you here today, old friends, and especially my old friend Bernard White. You know, I love this brother. If I don't say it nowhere else, I'm gonna say it right here. I love this brother. You know, so many times I remember when Bernard was still on the air, you know, we would be on the bus going to Washington. And we could call right into the station and let people know what we were doing right at that particular moment. You know, we had demonstrations, and Bernard just did so much to be supportive. And I see Fred here. Fred has been so supportive of everything. Fred was with us yesterday. You know, we had the anniversary of the Newark Rebellion commemoration. We've been commemorating the Newark Uprising for 30 years. Just about every year that POP has been in existence, we found in 1983, we commemorate the Newark Uprising, the Newark Rebellion. And Fred was there and has been there. And what did we have on Thursday? We had, what was it? Claudette Colvin, right, was with us on Thursday. But Fred was with us and is with us most of the time and bringing the videography skills that he has. But the movement needs media. That's for sure. On that, I don't think anybody could argue. The movement needs media. All kind of media. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
She does have a stay here. I don't know how much that will do.
One quick
So
thing.
how do you feel? Do you feel optimistic about this, or have you
About Adelaide Sanford?
Yeah.
Well, I just saw Dr. Calfani yesterday. When we had Claudette Colvin at New Jersey Transit. You know, New Jersey Transit on Thursday recognized Claudette Colvin's contributions to the civil rights movement, and Dr. Calfani was there, and he said that the state, that they're shutting the school down, I asked him about the stay, but he didn't seem to be particularly optimistic. Well, I wouldn't say optimistic or not. He just said, no, they're shutting the school down. You know, which is very, very sad. Great loss.
Okay. We're kind of running out of time, but I would like to at least see by hand who is interested in what committee. There are three currently, and maybe there should be also a fundraising committee, because Larry pointed out the importance of raising funds. Serene pointed out the importance with the caveat. So those two need to be kind of worked. We do have something in our literature, but sister over here talked about good fundraising techniques. So we have three committees and possibly four. One is the legal research. Another one is direct action. And the last one is education and outreach. And possibly the fourth one of fundraising. Who is interested in legal research?
I'm going to have them sign the papers. Is there a list?
Yeah, we have to sign it. Legal and research means to see how certain legal things can be done with Pacifica in order to stop some things, bring it back to its mission, whether there needs to be a case brought against them, researching how the bylaws work, what the laws reference to foundations are, that kind of legal research area. So that's one. So please raise your hands for that. I just sort of one hand over here. Another committee is the education and outreach. That's kind of generating membership. And we have the chair, not the chair, but the facilitator of that committee. Who was? Oh, Saran. And she might want to say a few words about what that committee was about.
Well, the Education and Outreach Committee, we try to educate and do outreach within our communities regarding what's happening with Pacifica. And we need people who have ideas and other things that they want to share and help us to do that. We work in collaboration with the various other committees. I will be working with the various other committees because we're not educating or doing outreach in a vacuum, but we like the education and outreach that helps all the various committees come together and get their programs going on. Okay, we've only had one meeting, but we're looking for people who are willing to join us and help do the outreach and help do the education. And whatever skills you have, we need.
So who's interested in education and outreach? I don't, Bob, I don't know if you have. Well, there's no limit to the number on the committee. It's basically based on your interest and your expertise or this interest. And if the committee, depending on how it grows, it may split up, one take more education, one take more outreach. But if again, raise your hand if you're interested in education and outreach so that we have, and then the last committee is direct action. Sarah, is that your committee?
Yeah, I'm on it. Honestly, I put my vote on it.
hold on. This is Sarah Klebner. She's a member of Justice and Unity. She ran for the local station board also.
Yeah, I guess, sorry, I'm not used to speaking to the mic. The Direct Action Committee had talked about demonstrating in relation to the layoffs that they had threatened at the station, but since those seem not to be happening immediately, that's not the focus right now. And I think what we're going to want, I think my sense, and I'm speaking as an individual from this committee, is that we would want to, I think the education and outreach piece is the direct action that we need to take now because we need to get more people involved. So that's my opinion. I'm just speaking as an individual within the committee. I'm also, personally, I'd like to say I'm interested in participating in fundraising because given the situation at the station, and we hadn't had a fundraising committee formed up yet, but I'm glad that it's being talked about and I'm looking forward to doing that.
Okay, so anyone interested in direct action? All right. Anyone interested in fundraising? All right. Okay, so it looks, fundraising? Direct action. You do direct action? So, three together. All right, so it looks like and there's one person interested in fundraising, right? Yeah, Bob is taking the names over here.
I like all the committees, but I don't want to spread myself too thin.
Sure.
I'm not.
Speaking of Mike.
I just wanted to offer a suggestion. I'm Najee from Newark. With legal, although I have some legal and corporate finance background, I don't want to get into the committee now, but within the context of the membership, I'd like you all to entertain the question of maybe formalizing an organization of the membership so that you have the grounds to either subpoena information on the financial status of the station and its operation, and then make formal demands on it, because as I think, if I'm not correct, membership as an entity can also be represented. I know you have representatives on the local station board and so on, but creating a stronger arm out of the members, I think, will be a viable option to kind of make a stronger voice as well.
Okay, I hope that, I know one thing that has happened with the legal committee is that Mimi Rosenberg, who's an attorney and she has a program on Mondays, she kind of keyed that during the first meeting. And I believe, Bob, correct me if I'm incorrect, that in order to bring a case, just like you hear with the Supreme Court, you have to have a person standing.
Well, you can be a friend of the court, but that's once it's in the list.
Right, in order to bring a case. And we do have a person, Earl Maitland, who has agreed to, a former producer with BAI, worked very closely with Bernard and Serene on a number of programs. Is a person that has offered himself. And in fact, I believe in the case after the Christmas Code 2000, Earl was also the person who was part of the case in order to get the station back. He put himself forward. So what you're saying in terms of having a legal entity, we'll also add that to the list around the membership, but there is a process in place with the person who is putting himself forward to have standing for any particular case. Okay. All right. We have a few minutes if you want to. We have sheets, particularly that Education and Outreach Committee, or quite a few folks. If you just want to come together just briefly and just board some ideas. If we just get together for like 10 minutes, and then so we can capture those ideas quickly. The legal committee and the, what's the other one? The direct action. If you guys want to get together, there is a, Johnny, want to give them a seat and as we close out, we grab some of the chairs and bring them to the room so that we can leave this place. And just grab a chair and make yourself comfortable. What committee like to report first?
Okay, I'm already standing, so I'll go.
All right, let's go with
Education and outreach.
education and outreach. Who's reporting?
And Rob and I.
We don't have the microphone.
It's just
Okay. Is everybody listening? Yes. Okay, we met with the Education and Outreach Committee. There were about, what, 10 of us?
Can you get the microphone? Is the microphone?
But there isn't any mic.
The mic, that mic doesn't work.
Let's go.
Mic jack don't work.
Stand up and make this
Just stand up, we can hear you.
We're out of mic.
Yes, talk loud.
Okay, now is the time for silence. Okay, the Education and Outreach Committee met, and there were about, I would think about 10 maybe, a little less than that, of us that met, and we talked about various ways that we could do things within education and outreach, and a number of people had some very good ideas in terms of doing some stuff. We talked about possibility of getting things passed out at the education co-op and getting notices at the co-op, which are going to be followed up on. We talked about the possibility of our meeting with a combined group of all the committees when they meet on Tuesday, and we will be getting back to the committee to let them know if that meeting is going to go forward. At this point, we did not set a date for our next committee meeting. People were very enthusiastic regarding our meetings and very eager to come up with ways to do outreach. This gentleman had this piece he was passing out about getting the word out about WBAI. Someone else talked about the buttons, right? Talked about the possibility of doing buttons and getting the word out. We talked about the possibilities of identifying other types of places that people might know of in terms of ways we can also get words out to various committees. That's right, various people and stuff. Getting trucks, all kinds of exciting things that we're going to be working on and trying to see which ones are really good for us to move full speed ahead. And I am very excited about the committee. Bob is very excited about the committee, and we look forward to working with everyone. They gave us their telephone numbers, and I was thrilled to hear that some of our members do not have emails, such as myself. So I felt like I was in a whirl of love. So we're going to be reaching out to everyone, and we're hoping that all of us together can really make an impact on letting the community know what's happening and what can be done to really help Save WBAI and get it back to where it needs to be.
Thank you. All right, the next committee would be direct action.
We're a very small committee at this meeting today, and so the sense seemed to be that we want to contribute to the outreach efforts. That's the direct action that's needed at this time. So that's my sense. If anybody else wants to speak to that, but.
So what ways did you come up? You have any things?
Well, connecting to the outreach and education committee.
Okay.
Working in that condition. We don't have any specific plans right now, other than what tagging along.
We look forward to your support.
Yes.
All right.
And it shall be forthcoming as it is right now.
The last committee would be the Legal Research Committee.
Okay. All right, so, a lot of questions were brought up. More questions, we don't have the answers, but basically, who was responsible for the poor finances? Can the FCC investigate Pacifica Radio? And then is there a separate account independent from the station for fundraising and staff? So when people do these fundraisers, where's the money going? So is there a separate account being set up? Is there a separate account existing? Young lady mentioned POP as maybe being a fiduciary of the account. I don't know. But basically, there needs to be a separate account because we don't want to keep putting the money back into the station and they're mismanaging it. And then there was a question about just getting a by-quarter comparing contracts for 2013. What happened, what's working, what's not working, what resources are available, and just having accountability. So these are the questions for whoever's in charge of the legal committee. If they could answer them, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there any other concluding remarks that anyone would like to make at this point? Yes. We have 5 minutes to get these chairs over to that door and
fundraising. Can WBAI do a year-round raffle fundraiser? Just sell raffle tickets for the whole year round and just collect whatever you can collect.
Raffle fundraising.
It's a $1 raffle. If you want a book, it's $10. Just do it all year round, and that way you got a little bit of.
Where's the raffle?
Just have a raffle. All year round raffle.
You want more than pennies. I thought you were against slavery.
Only under certain conditions.
Whatever is happening.
So would she use this as well?
The folding chairs go right up against that wall.
There were a lot of things.
I think so. We need,